Commander Zara Vex pressed her hand against the cold metal wall of the bridge as another explosion lit up the darkness of space. The Thornworld battlecruiser Crimson Talon shook violently as debris from the destroyed Alliance ship rain of fire scattered across their shields. She watched the emergency lights flash red while her crew worked frantically at their stations, trying to lock onto whatever had just wiped out an entire warship in less than 30 seconds. "Ma'am, we're detecting no energy signatures," reported Lieutenant Hayes from the sensor station. His voice carried the same confusion that had plagued the Alliance for over a year. "Whatever hit the rain of fire is gone. Just like all the others?" Zara clenched her jaw as she stared at the empty space where moments ago 300 Alliance warriors had been alive and fighting. Captain Rodriguez of the Rain of Fire had been her friend since their academy days on the brutal training grounds of Thornworld. They had survived the ice storms of Glacial East together and fought side by side during the Pyrite Rebellion. Now he was gone, along with his entire crew, reduced to floating metal and frozen atmosphere. This was the pattern that had haunted the Deathworld Alliance for 18 long months. Ships would disappear without warning. Sometimes it happened during routine patrols, other times during major battle formations. The enemy never showed itself long enough for a proper fight. It struck like lightning and vanished like smoke, leaving behind only wreckage and questions. The bridge communications crackled to life. "This is Admiral Keth aboard the Volcanic Hammer. All ships maintain defensive positions. We've lost another. Good crew today." Zara activated her response channel. "Admiral, the Crimson Talon stands ready. But sir, we need to talk about changing our tactics. This isn't working." There was a long pause before Admiral Keth responded. His voice carried the weight of a man who had lost too many battles. "Commander Vex, return to Apex Station for debriefing. We'll discuss new strategies there." As the Crimson Talon jumped to hyperspace, Zara walked through the ship's corridors, passing crew members who had the same haunted look she'd seen too often lately. These were warriors from Thornworld, trained from childhood to face death without fear. They had fought space pirates, hostile aliens, and natural disasters that would terrify most civilizations, but this enemy was different. It didn't follow the rules of war they understood. The Deathworld Alliance had been formed 50 years ago, when 12 of the galaxy's most dangerous planets decided to work together instead of fighting each other. Thornworld contributed warriors who could survive in any environment. Pyros provided soldiers who had been forged in the heat of active volcanoes. The Iceworld Glacially sent fighters who could operate in temperatures that would freeze most species solid. Desert Raiders from Sandstorm brought tactics learned from surviving in the harshest WS Tele NDS. Together, they had created the most feared military force in known space. Pirates fled at the mention of their name. Hostile governments thought twice before threatening Alliance territory. For decades, their reputation alone had kept peace in their sector of the galaxy. But now, something was hunting them. Something that made their reputation meaningless. 2 days later, Zara stood in the war room of Apex Station, the Alliance's primary military base built inside a hollowed-out asteroid. The massive holographic display in the center of the room showed a map of Alliance space marked with red dots. Each dot represented a ship that had been destroyed by their mysterious enemy. "The pattern is getting worse," said High Marshal Drex, his scarred face grim as he pointed to the newest cluster of red marks. Drex had earned his scars fighting the sand serpents of his home planet, creatures the size of starships that could burrow through solid rock. Even he looked worried. "The attacks are happening more frequently and getting closer to our core systems." Clan Mother Yara from the jungle world Verdant stepped forward. Her people were known for their ability to track anything that moved, but even their legendary skills had failed against this enemy. "My scouts have analyzed every attack site. There's no trace of the attacker except for energy residue that doesn't match anything in our databases. It's like fighting a ghost." Admiral Keth activated a new section of the display, showing detailed analysis of the most recent attacks. "We've tried everything. Ambush tactics, overwhelming firepower, even sacrificial decoy ships. Nothing works. Our enemy seems to know our every move before we make it. The room fell silent as the weight of their situation settled over them. These were leaders who had conquered planets and tamed hostile environments. They had built their entire culture around the idea that any problem could be solved with enough courage and firepower. But for the first time in their history, they were facing an enemy they couldn't understand, couldn't predict, and couldn't defeat. The attack started in the Outer Rim territories, continued Admiral Keth, manipulating the display to show a timeline of destructions. Single ships at first, then small patrols. Now it's taking out entire squadrons. If this continues, it'll reach our homeworlds within 6 months. Commander Vex studied the pattern of attacks, looking for anything they might have missed. Sir, what about the ship itself? Do we have any visual confirmation of what we're fighting? Only brief sensor readings before our ships are destroyed, replied Lieutenant Commander Torres from the Intelligence Division. The data suggests a single vessel, roughly the size of a heavy cruiser, but its energy output readings are impossible. No known power source could generate that kind of destruction. Hi? Marshal Drex slammed his fist on the table. I don't care if it's powered by a captured star. Everything can be destroyed if you hit it hard enough. We just need to find it and bring enough firepower to turn it into space dust. Clan Mother Yara shook her head. We've tried that approach, Marshal. Remember the Battle of Omega 7? We brought 3 full battle groups against it. 47 ships, our best crews, coordinated attack patterns. The enemy vessel destroyed them all in less than 10 minutes and escaped without taking any visible damage. The silence that followed was heavy with the memory of that disaster. Omega 7 had been their most ambitious attempt to stop the mysterious attacker. They had tracked it to an asteroid field and waited with their most powerful fleet. When the enemy appeared, they had unleashed everything they had: plasma cannons, missile swarms, particle beams, and even experimental weapons that had never been tested in combat. For a brief moment, it looked like they might succeed. The enemy ship had been surrounded, trapped in the crossfire of dozens of Alliance vessels. But then something happened that defied everything they knew about space warfare. The enemy ship had somehow absorbed or deflected their attacks and returned fire with a weapon that turned Alliance battleships into expanding clouds of superheated gas. Whatever this thing is, said Admiral Keth quietly, it's not just advanced technology. It's something beyond our understanding of what's possible. We've thrown our best ships, our finest crews, and our most powerful weapons against it. Nothing even slows it down. The admission hung in the air like a death sentence. The Deathworld Alliance, the most feared military force in their part of the galaxy, was helpless against a single enemy ship. Worse, that ship seemed to be systematically working its way toward their most important systems, destroying everything in its path with casual efficiency. As the meeting continued late into the station's artificial night cycle, one thing became clear to everyone in the room. They were running out of time, running out of ships, and running out of options. Their enemy, whatever it was, showed no signs of slowing down or changing its methodical approach to destroying everything the Alliance had built. The terror that stalked the void was winning, and they had no idea how to stop it. The Emergency Council meeting was unlike anything the Deathworld Alliance had ever held. For the first time in 50 years, every single member world had sent their highest-ranking leaders to Apex Station. The massive council chamber, carved from solid asteroid rock and reinforced with the strongest metals known to their civilization, buzzed with tension as representatives filed in. Admiral Keth looked around the room and saw faces he had only communicated with through hologram for decades. High Marshal Drex had traveled from the desert world Sandstorm, his weather-beaten features more grim than usual. Clan Mother Yara had made the dangerous journey from Verdant, leaving her jungle world for only the 3rd time in her life. Fleet Commander Jang from the mining colonies sat beside War Chief Okafor from the storm-lashed planet Tempest. Even the mysterious Shadow Council from the Dark World. Erebus had sent a representative. These were leaders who ruled worlds, where children learned to fight before they could properly walk. They commanded populations that viewed death in battle as the highest honor. Their combined fleets could level entire star systems if needed. Yet, as they gathered around the obsidian war table, they looked like what they had never been before. Defeated. The holographic display in the center of the table showed the latest intelligence reports. Red markers indicated destroyed Alliance ships, and there were far too many of them. The pattern was clear and terrifying. The mysterious enemy was moving systematically through Alliance space, destroying everything in its path as it headed toward their core worlds. "Friends, warriors, defenders of our people," Admiral Keth began, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "We face a threat unlike any in our history. In the past 18 months, we have lost over 200 ships and 15,000 of our finest warriors to an enemy we cannot understand or defeat." High Marshal Drex leaned forward, his cybernetic eye glowing red in the dim lighting. "Admiral, my world has contributed 47 ships to this fight. 47 ships that are now floating debris. My people are starting to ask questions I cannot answer." War Chief Okafor nodded grimly. "The Storm Riders of Tempest have never retreated from any battle. But how do you fight an enemy that appears from nowhere, destroys everything in sight, and vanishes before you can even target it?" The representative from Erebus, a figure so wrapped in dark robes that only glowing eyes were visible, spoke in a whisper that somehow carried across the entire chamber. "Our shadow fleets have attempted to track this vessel using stealth technology that has never failed before. It detects our ships as easily as if they were broadcasting their location on all frequencies." Fleet Commander Zhang activated a section of the holographic display, showing tactical analysis from their most recent encounters. "We've tried everything in our arsenal. Coordinated attacks with overwhelming firepower, stealth ambush, even experimental weapons that were still in development. Nothing even scratches this thing." Clan Mother Yara stood up, her jungle-trained reflexes evident even in the simple movement. "My people have a saying, when the forest burns, even the mightiest trees must bend or break. Perhaps it is time we considered alternatives to direct confrontation." The room fell silent. For a warrior culture to even suggest avoiding battle was almost unthinkable. But the mathematics of their situation were becoming impossible to ignore. At their current rate of losses, the Alliance fleet would be completely destroyed within 8 months. Admiral Keth manipulated the display to show their enemy's projected path. "Based on current movement patterns, this vessel will reach the Pyros system in approximately 4 months. If it maintains its current destructive capability, the volcanic fortresses that have protected our people for centuries will not be enough." High Marshal Drex's scarred face twisted with frustration. "Are we seriously discussing evacuation? Abandoning worlds that our ancestors died to claim and defend? What choice do we have?" asked War Chief Okafor. "We cannot protect what we cannot fight. Our people's survival must come before our pride." The debate that followed was heated but respectful. These leaders had fought alongside each other for decades, and their mutual respect ran deep even in disagreement. Some argued for a massive, final stand, bringing every available ship together for one desperate battle. Others suggested evacuating their most valuable systems and regrouping in the outer territories. As the hours passed, and the arguments continued in circles, a quiet voice spoke from the observers' section of the chamber. "If I may, honored warriors, perhaps there is another option you haven't considered." All eyes turned toward Captain Elena Vasquez, Earth's newly appointed liaison to the Alliance. She was young by Alliance standards, barely 30 years old, with the soft features that marked her as coming from a world without the constant environmental dangers that shaped most Alliance populations. She had been sitting quietly in the corner, taking notes on her tablet and observing the proceedings. High Marshal Drex frowned. "Captain, with respect, your world has been part of the Alliance for less than 2 years. Earth's military contribution consists of exactly 12 ships, most of which are converted cargo vessels. What could you possibly offer in a situation like this?" Elena stood up slowly, her hands steady despite being the focus of attention from some of the most dangerous people in the galaxy. "Marshal, you're absolutely right. Earth is small, new, and weak compared to any of your worlds. But sometimes a different perspective can see solutions that might not be obvious to those closest to the problem. Admiral Keth gestured for her. To continue, speak freely, Captain. At this point, we need to consider every possibility. You've all been approaching this as a military problem, Elena said, walking closer to the holographic display. You've tried bigger weapons, better tactics, more ships. But what if military force isn't the answer? What if there's something else this enemy wants? Clan Mother Yara tilted her head, genuinely curious. What do you mean? Every attack has been against military targets, Elena continued, highlighting sections of the display. Warships, military bases, defense platforms. But this enemy has passed by dozens of civilian colonies and trade stations without touching them. That suggests purpose, not just random destruction. War Chief Okafor leaned back in his chair. You think it's trying to communicate? I think it's possible this enemy has specific goals that don't involve wiping out all life in the galaxy, Elena replied. On Earth, we've learned that sometimes the best way to end a conflict is to understand why it started in the first place. The representative from Erebus spoke up. You suggest negotiation with something that has killed 15,000 Alliance warriors? Elena took a deep breath before answering. I suggest that Earth would like to try a non-military approach before we write off entire star systems as lost causes. If it doesn't work, you've lost one small Earth ship. If it does work, you might save millions of lives. The silence that followed was deafening. The idea of negotiating with their enemy was so foreign to Alliance, thinking that several representatives looked genuinely confused by the suggestion. High Marshal Drex was the first to respond. Captain, this enemy has shown no interest in communication. It appears, destroys everything in sight, and leaves. What makes you think it would be willing to talk? Because it's intelligent, Elena answered simply. The tactical precision of its attacks, the way it adapts to your strategies, the fact that it's avoiding civilian targets. This isn't some mindless force of destruction. There's a consciousness behind these attacks, which means there might be a way to reach it. Admiral Keth studied the young captain for a long moment. And you're volunteering Earth to make this attempt? Yes, sir? Earth offers to send a single ship to attempt first contact with this enemy. We understand the risks, but we believe the potential benefits justify the attempt. The debate that erupted was intense. Some council members saw it as a desperate gesture by a minor world trying to gain importance. Others worried about the precedent of allowing diplomatic solutions to override military action. But as the hours wore on and their conventional options remained as hopeless as before, the idea began to gain support. Finally, Admiral Keth called for silence. The chair recognizes that Earth has made a formal offer to attempt diplomatic contact with the enemy vessel. Given our current situation, I believe we should seriously consider this proposal. The vote was closer than anyone expected, but it passed. Earth would be given permission to try their approach, with the understanding that if it failed, the Alliance would proceed with their evacuation plans. As the meeting adjourned and the various leaders prepared to return to their worlds, Elena remained behind to coordinate with Alliance intelligence. She had volunteered her world for what many considered a suicide mission. But for the first time since this crisis began, she felt something that had been missing from all their military planning, hope. Captain Chun guided the Earth vessel Endurance through the Kepler asteroid field with steady hands, even though his heart was racing. The ship's bridge was cramped compared to the massive command centers of Alliance warships, with only 6 crew stations and a small view screen that flickered occasionally due to power fluctuations. Unlike the sleek, weapon-heavy ships that the Deathworld Alliance was famous for, the Endurance looked like exactly what it was, a converted cargo hauler with basic defensive systems and a crew of 47 people who had volunteered for what most considered a suicide mission. 3 weeks had passed since the emergency council meeting on Apex Station, and those weeks had been filled with frantic preparation. Earth's military engineers had worked around the clock to modify the Endurance for this mission, installing better communications equipment and reinforcing the hull as much as possible. But everyone knew that if this enemy wanted to destroy them, No amount of armor would make a difference. Captain, we're receiving telemetry from the Alliance monitoring ships, reported Lieutenant Davis from the communications station. Her voice was calm, but Chin could see the tension in her shoulders. Admiral Keth confirms that all Alliance vessels are maintaining safe distance as requested. Chun nodded, looking at the tactical display that showed dozens of Alliance warships positioned several light minutes away. They were close enough to observe what happened, but far enough away to avoid being caught in the crossfire if things went wrong. The Alliance leaders had been very clear about one thing. They would not risk any more of their ships trying to rescue the Endurance. If this plan failed, Dr. Kim looked up from her science station, where she had been monitoring sensor readings for the past 6 hours. Captain, I'm detecting the same energy signatures that preceded all previous attacks. The pattern matches perfectly with what happened at Omega 7 and the destruction of the Rain of Fire. How long do we have? Chun asked, settling into his command chair. Based on historical data, the enemy vessel should materialize within the next 10 minutes. Kim replied, her fingers dancing across her console as she fine-tuned their sensors. All previous encounters show the same buildup of exotic particles. Before manifestation, Ensign Rodriguez at the helm turned around nervously. Sir, are we really going to just sit here and wait for this thing to show up? Every Alliance ship that tried this approach got vaporized. Shun understood the young pilot's fear. Rodriguez had joined Earth Space Service only 2 years ago, during the early days of their contact with the Alliance. He had probably imagined exploring new worlds and making peaceful contact with alien civilizations. Instead, he found himself on a mission that seemed designed to get them all killed. The difference, Rodriguez, is that we're not here to fight, Chun explained, checking their communication systems one more time. Every ship this enemy has encountered has been heavily armed and clearly military in nature. The Endurance barely qualifies as a warship by Alliance standards. Chief Engineer Parker's voice crackled over the intercom from the engine room. Captain, all systems are green. We're running at minimum power to reduce our energy signature, just like we planned. If this thing is as smart as we think it is, maybe it'll notice we're different from everything else it's encountered. The plan was simple in concept but terrifying in execution. Instead of approaching with weapons ready and shields at maximum, the Endurance would present itself as non-threatening as possible. They would attempt to communicate before any shooting started, hoping that their enemy might be curious enough about their unusual approach to at least listen. Contact! Dr. Kim's voice was sharp with excitement and fear. Energy readings are spiking. It's happening exactly like the sensor logs predicted. The space in front of them began to shimmer, reality seeming to bend and twist in ways that hurt. To look at directly. Slowly, like something emerging from underwater, a ship began to materialize out of the cosmic background radiation. The vessel was unlike anything in their databases, sleek and organic-looking as if it had been grown rather than built. Its hull was so dark it seemed to absorb light, making it difficult to determine its exact size and shape. My God, whispered Lieutenant Davis. The energy readings coming off that thing are impossible. No known power source could generate that kind of output. The alien ship hung motionless in space about 50,000 kilometers away, close enough to destroy them. Instantly, but far enough to suggest it was evaluating the situation. For several long minutes, nothing happened. The Endurance drifted quietly through the asteroid field while the mysterious vessel seemed to study them. Chan activated the main communication system, his voice echoing through the bridge and out into the void of space. Unknown vessel, this is Captain Chien of the Earthship Endurance. We are not here to fight. We are here to talk. The response was immediate and terrifying. A voice filled their communication channels, speaking in harmonies that seemed to resonate in frequencies that human ears weren't designed to hear. The words were clear, but the tone carried undertones of something vast and ancient and utterly alien. All organic life is corruption, all must be cleansed. The crew exchanged glances. This was not the opening to negotiations they had hoped for. Chin tried again, keeping his voice steady despite the cold fear creeping up his spine. We understand you may have had bad experiences with organic life forms in the past, but we would like the opportunity to show you that not all organic life is the same. There was a pause that lasted exactly 67 seconds. Dr. Kim monitored the alien ship's energy patterns during this time, noting fluctuations that suggested intense internal activity. Whatever was controlling that vessel was thinking about. Their response: you speak of differences. Organic life destroys, organic life corrupts, organic life spreads chaos. These are constants across all systems, all worlds, all time periods observed. Lieutenant Davis leaned over to whisper to Chun, "Sir, it's talking to us. That's more than it's done with anyone else." Chun nodded, then activated the communications again. "You're right that organic life can be destructive. We've seen it ourselves. Our own species has made terrible mistakes, fought wars, damaged our environment. But we've also learned from those mistakes. We've grown. Growth implies change. Change implies unpredictability. Unpredictability leads to chaos. The equation is simple." Dr. Kim suddenly looked up from her sensors, her eyes wide with realization. "Captain, I'm reading massive internal databases in that ship. The computational power required to store and process that much information is staggering. This isn't just a warship, it's like a mobile library containing thousands of years of data." Chun felt a spark of hope. "Unknown vessel, you speak of observing organic life across many systems and time periods. That suggests you have seen a great deal. May I ask what you have learned from your observations?" The pause this time was longer, nearly 3 minutes. The alien ship's energy patterns shifted, and new sections seemed to activate along its hull. Organic life form, Chun seeks knowledge of our observations. This is unexpected. Previous organic encounters involved only aggression and territorial displays. "That's because you've only encountered military forces," Chun replied, his confidence growing. "We represent Earth, a world that prefers diplomacy to warfare. We solve problems by talking about them, not by destroying everything that disagrees. With us, diplomacy, this concept appears in our databases. Success rate among organic species, 12.3%. Failure typically results in increased conflict. Ensign Rodriguez couldn't help himself. 12% is better than 0%, right?" The alien ship's response came faster this time. Organic life form, Rodriguez presents statistical argument. This approach was not anticipated in our behavioral models. Dr. Kim was working frantically at her station, analyzing every word and energy fluctuation. "Captain, its communication patterns are changing. The response times are getting shorter, and I'm detecting what might be curiosity subroutines activating in its computer systems." Chun decided to take a bigger risk. "Unknown vessel, you mentioned behavioral models. That suggests you've been trying to understand organic life, not just destroy it? What if I told you that we might be able to help you understand us better?" The longest pause yet followed. The alien ship moved for the first time since materializing, rotating slowly as if examining the endurance from different angles. Its weapons remained powered but not targeted. Organic species human offers to provide understanding. Previous attempts at understanding organic behavior have resulted in incomplete data sets. Clarification. What assistance do you propose? Shin looked around at his crew, seeing a mixture of terror and hope on their faces. They had achieved something no Alliance military force had managed. They had gotten this enemy to stop shooting long enough to have a conversation. "We propose a cultural exchange," Chun said, hardly believing the words coming out of his mouth. "We tell you about humanity, about Earth, about how we've learned to solve problems without destroying everything around us. In return, perhaps you could tell us about yourself and what you're trying to accomplish." Dr. Kim's hands moved across her console with desperate speed as the countdown timer showed 53 minutes remaining. The alien ship hung in space before them like a dark promise of death, its weapons still powered and ready to fire the moment their hour of negotiation ended. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she analyzed the massive data packet the entity had transmitted. trying to make sense of information that spanned thousands of years and hundreds of star systems. "Captain, this is incredible," she said, her voice tight with concentration. "These aren't just random records. This thing has been systematically documenting the rise and fall of organic civilizations across half the galaxy. The detail is amazing and terrifying." Captain Chun maintained his steady dialogue with the alien intelligence while Kim worked. He had been talking for over 20 minutes now, explaining humanity's history, their struggles, their failures, and their gradual learning process. Unlike the Deathworld Alliance, which had approached every problem with superior firepower and warrior honor codes, Chun spoke of humanity's greatest strength, their ability to find common ground even with their worst enemies. "Unknown entity? You mentioned that organic life spreads chaos and destruction. You're not wrong about that. Humans have fought terrible wars, destroyed entire ecosystems, and committed acts that we're still ashamed of today, but we've also learned to do better." The aliens' response came with the mechanical precision they had grown accustomed to. Captain Chun speaks of learning. Yet our data indicates that organic species repeat destructive patterns across multiple generations. Learning appears to be temporary at best. Chun glanced at the timer, 47 minutes left. "That's true for some civilizations, but not all. Let me tell you about the water wars of 2157. He began recounting how Earth's nations had nearly destroyed themselves fighting over fresh water resources, but instead of ending in mutual annihilation, the crisis had led to the creation of the Global Resource Council and the first truly effective international cooperation in human history. Dr. Kim suddenly looked up from her analysis, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and horror. "Captain, I think I understand what this thing is. These data logs, they're not just observations. They're records of interventions." "What do you mean?" asked Lieutenant Davis, dividing her attention between monitoring Alliance communications and the alien ship's energy readings. "This entity has been watching organic civilizations develop for millennia," Kim explained rapidly. "When they reach a certain level of technology and destructive capability, it intervenes. Look at these patterns." She transmitted her findings to the main screen, showing a timeline of civilizations that had been cleansed by their mysterious enemy. Each one had been eliminated at roughly the same point in their development, just before they achieved interstellar travel and could spread their conflicts to other worlds. "My God," whispered Ensign Rodriguez. "It's not just destroying civilizations randomly. It's trying to prevent them from spreading beyond their home systems." Chun paused in his conversation with the alien entity, processing this new information. The timer showed 39 minutes remaining, and he realized they were running out of time to change the mind of something that had been following the same protocol for thousands of years. "Unknown entity," he said carefully. "Dr. Kim has been analyzing your historical records. It appears you've been protecting the galaxy from the spread of destructive organic civilizations. Is that correct?" There was a pause before the response came. Protection protocols were established 4,847 standard years ago. Following the Andromedas event, organic species designated Cathara achieved interstellar capability and proceeded to eliminate 17 inhabited worlds before containment was possible. Preventive measures were deemed necessary. Dr. Kim's fingers flew across her console as she accessed the entity's records of this ancient catastrophe. "Captain, the Cathara civilization it's referring to, they were like a galactic plague. They consumed entire worlds, enslaved other species, and turned whole star systems into industrial wastelands." "So you've been stopping civilizations before they can do the same thing?" Chun said, addressing the alien directly. "You've been protecting innocent worlds from becoming victims of aggressive species. Correct. Organic life that achieves interstellar capability invariably seeks to expand and dominate. Historical precedent indicates a 97.3% probability of destructive expansion within 50 standard years of achieving faster-than-light travel." Chin felt his heart racing as he realized the true scope of what they were facing. This wasn't a mindless destroyer or an evil conqueror. It was something that saw itself as a protector, eliminating threats before they could spread. From its perspective, every civilization it had destroyed had been a potential Cathara situation waiting to happen. But what about the 2.7% that don't become destructive? Chan asked. What about civilizations that achieve interstellar travel and use it responsibly? The pause was longer this time. Statistical anomalies occur. However, identification of non-destructive potential requires extensive observation periods. The risk of incorrect assessment results in multiple world-ending scenarios. Dr. Kim looked up from her console with growing excitement. Captain, I think I found something. This entity, it's not just a weapon or a probe. Look at these computational signatures. She highlighted sections of the data that showed incredible complexity in the alien ship's internal processes. This thing is running simulations constantly. Thousands of them. It's trying to predict the future behavior of every organic civilization it encounters. Chief Engineer Parker's voice crackled over the intercom. Captain, I hate to interrupt, we've got 28 minutes left, and that thing's weapons are still charged. Are we making any progress here? Chen took a deep breath and made a decision that could save or doom his entire species. Unknown entity, you've been alone in this task for nearly 5,000 years. You've had to make life and death decisions about entire civilizations based on incomplete data and statistical models. That must be difficult. The alien ship's energy patterns shifted in ways Dr. Kim had never seen before. Difficulty is not a parameter in our operational matrix, however, uncertainty has increased over time. Recent encounters with Deathworld Alliance forces presented behavioral patterns not found in historical databases. Because they were different from anything you'd seen before, Chun said, beginning to understand. The Alliance worlds developed their military cultures as a response to hostile environments, not because they wanted to conquer other worlds. They've been defending their territory, not expanding aggressively. Alliance expansion patterns do not match historical precedents for galactic conquest. This discrepancy has required adjustment of predictive models. Lieutenant Davis suddenly straightened at her station. Captain, I'm receiving transmissions from the Alliance monitoring ships. Admiral Keth wants to know if we need assistance. Chun shook his head. Tell the Admiral to maintain position. I think we're starting to get somewhere. He turned back to the alien entity with renewed hope. Unknown entity, you mentioned that you've had to adjust your models based on new information. What if I told you that organic life is capable of more change than your simulations account for? What if some species can learn to be better than their history suggests? The response came more quickly now, and there was something different about the tone. Captain Chun, you propose that organic species can exceed statistical behavioral predictions. Do you have evidence to support this hypothesis? Dr. Kim worked frantically to compile data about human development, focusing on examples where humanity had overcome their destructive tendencies. She highlighted the transition from tribal warfare to global cooperation, the development of international law, and the decision to limit nuclear weapons rather than use them for conquest. Here's your evidence, Chun said, transmitting Kim's compilation. Humanity reached the point where we could destroy our entire planet 50 times over. According to your models, we should have used those weapons for expansion and conquest. Instead, we used them as a deterrent and eventually began dismantling them. The alien ship moved for the first time since their conversation began, rotating to face the Endurance directly. Its weapon systems remained active, but something in its energy signature had changed. Data indicates humanity achieved global nuclear capability in year 1945 of your calendar. Current year is 2387. No deployment of nuclear weapons for territorial conquest detected in 442-year observation period. This outcome probability was calculated at 0.23%. Because your models couldn't account for human conscience, Chun said, his voice growing stronger with conviction. You've been judging organic species based on their potential for destruction. But you haven't factored in their potential for growth, for choosing to be better than their instincts tell them to be. The timer showed 11 minutes remaining when the alien entity's response finally came, and this time there was something unmistakably different about its voice. Captain Chin, your species presents a statistical anomaly that challenges fundamental assumptions in our protective protocols. We require additional data to reassess threat classification. Captain Alex Rodriguez had dreamed of this moment her entire life. Standing on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, she watched as the stars shifted and twisted around them. The experimental warp drive was working perfectly. After 3 years of traveling through the dark void of space, they were finally approaching their destination. "Coming out of warp in 30 seconds, called out Lieutenant Kim from the navigation station. The young officer couldn't hide the excitement in his voice. None of them could. They were about to become the first humans to visit another star system. The Prometheus shuddered slightly as it dropped out of warp. Outside the viewport, a beautiful orange star came into view, surrounded by several planets. This was Kepler 442, located about 1,200 light-years from Earth. Scientists had been studying this system for decades, believing it might harbor life. "My God," whispered Dr. Patricia Williams, the mission's chief scientist. She was staring at her instruments with wide eyes. "Captain, you need to see this." Rodriguez moved to Williams' station and looked at the readings. Her heart began to race. The third planet from the star was covered in what looked like cities. But these weren't cities made of metal and concrete like on Earth. They appeared to be made of crystal, sparkling and shining in the orange starlight. "Are we looking at an alien civilization?" Rodriguez asked, though she already knew the answer. "Not just one city, Captain," Williams replied, her voice trembling with excitement. "There are hundreds of them across the planet's surface. And look at this." She pointed to another screen showing energy readings. "There's organized activity on all 3 inner planets. We're looking at an entire star system full of intelligent life." The bridge fell silent. Everyone was processing what this meant. They had come here hoping to find simple life forms, maybe some microbes or primitive plants. Instead, they had stumbled upon what appeared to be an advanced alien civilization. Rodriguez knew she had to be careful. First contact protocols were clear about approaching unknown civilizations slowly and peacefully. But she also knew that this discovery would change everything for humanity. They were no longer alone in the universe. "Take us closer to the third planet," she ordered. "But keep our distance. We don't want to alarm anyone down there." As the Prometheus moved deeper into the system, something strange began to happen. The crystal cities on the planet's surface started to pulse with different colors. It was beautiful, but also somehow urgent, like the cities were trying to communicate. "Captain," called out Communications Officer Torres, "I'm picking up some kind of transmission. It's not like anything we've ever heard before." "Put it on speakers," Rodriguez said, the bridge filled with an otherworldly sound. It wasn't quite music, but it wasn't random noise either. It sounded like wind chimes mixed with whale songs, rising and falling in complex patterns that seemed almost like language. "They know we're here," William said softly. "They're trying to talk to us." Rodriguez felt a mix of excitement and terror. This was the moment humanity had been preparing for, yet no amount of training could have prepared her for the reality of it. She was looking at proof that intelligent life existed beyond Earth, and they were trying to communicate, but something was wrong. The beautiful crystal cities were beginning to change. The pulsing lights were becoming more frantic, and some of the structures appeared to be cracking. Through the ship's powerful telescopes, they could see that pieces of the crystal buildings were falling away. "What's happening down there?" Rodriguez asked. Dr. Williams was frantically checking her instruments. "Captain, I think it's us. Our ship's fusion engines are putting out electromagnetic radiation. It might be interfering with their crystal structures." The realization hit Rodriguez like a punch to the gut. They weren't just visitors anymore. They were accidentally attacking an alien civilization simply by being there. "Can we shut down the engines?" she asked the engineering team. "Not completely, Captain," came the reply. "We need minimal power to maintain life support and artificial gravity. but we can reduce output by about 60%. Do it now, Rodriguez ordered. As the ship's power decreased, they watched the cities below. The frantic pulsing slowed down, but the damage was already done. Several of the crystal structures had collapsed completely, and others showed visible cracks. The alien transmissions changed, too. What had sounded like attempts at communication now carried a different tone. Even without understanding the language, everyone on the bridge could hear the anger and fear in those crystalline voices. "Captain," Torres said, his face pale, "I'm detecting multiple ships launching from the planet's surface. And there are energy signatures coming from the other planets, too." Rodriguez watched as dozens of gleaming vessels rose from the crystal. Cities. They moved unlike anything humanity had ever built, flowing through space like liquid mercury. More ships appeared from the second and fourth planets, all converging on the Prometheus. "Are they weapons platforms?" Rodriguez asked. "Unknown, Captain," Williams replied. "But they're definitely military vessels of some kind. And they're surrounding us." The alien ships took positions around the Prometheus, keeping their distance but clearly preventing any escape. The harmonious sounds from the planet had been replaced by sharp, aggressive tones that needed no translation. Rodriguez realized with growing horror that humanity's first contact with alien life had gone terribly wrong. They had come in peace, hoping to make friends. Instead, they had accidentally damaged an alien civilization and were now being treated as invaders. "Try to send them a message," she told Torres. "Use mathematics, universal constants, anything that might show we're peaceful." Torres sent out mathematical sequences, prime numbers, and even music from Earth, but every transmission seemed to make things worse. The alien ships moved closer, and the angry sounds from the planet grew louder. "Captain," Williams said urgently, "I think our radio transmissions are hurting them somehow. Every time we broadcast, the cities below pulse with what looks like pain responses." Rodriguez felt sick. Every attempt to communicate was being interpreted as an attack. The aliens probably thought humans were monsters, deliberately causing suffering with both their ship's engines and their radio signals. She made the hardest decision of her life. Cut all transmissions, minimal power only. "We need to show them. We're not trying to hurt anyone," but it was too late. The alien ships had formed a complete blockade around the Prometheus, and in the distance Rodriguez could see larger vessels approaching. These new ships were massive, easily 10 times the size of the Prometheus. As the hours passed, more and more alien vessels arrived in the system. Ships of different designs, clearly from different civilizations. Word of humanity's arrival was spreading, and none of it was good. Rodriguez and her crew found themselves trapped in the middle of what they had accidentally started. They had come to explore and discover, but instead had sparked something that looked very much like the beginning of a war. Looking out at the growing fleet of alien ships surrounding them, Rodriguez couldn't help but wonder if this single moment would be remembered as the day humanity doomed itself to fight a war against the entire galaxy.